This morning I want to look at two very familiar stories, and it pertains to four people that can be examples to us of people who did not lose their faith and their trust in the Lord. So open up your Bibles to the book of Daniel. We're going to be in Daniel chapter 3 and also in chapter 6. The first story I want to look at in Daniel chapter 3 is about three young men named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And the second story I want to look at is the story of Daniel himself, Daniel in the lion's den. Probably one of the most familiar stories that we all have heard and know, and I think most of us could tell the story by heart. But what has happened in the book of Daniel? Daniel is probably one of the most prophetic books in the Old Testament. Not only did Daniel speak of prophecies of things to come, but he gave us dates for some of those things. Scholars have been able to go through and look at Daniel's prophecies, and things that he has said come true thousands of years later. But what has happened is King Nebuchadnezzar from Babylon had invaded Jerusalem. He had destroyed the city, and he had taken many people captive. And this story of Daniel takes place with these Jewish men who are in captivity in Babylon. And we see the first three that, now this is a pagan nation. They don't worship the one true God. They worship false gods. They have a lot of forms of worship that are ungodly, things that they would do. But what we see in the lives of these four men is that they never denied their one true God, the same God that we worship and serve. And because they never denied Him, they were blessed. But even though they were blessed, they went through what appeared to be some terrible times. And at the end of Daniel chapter 2, it tells us that the king placed Daniel in a high position. He gave him many gifts. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon. And he placed him in charge of all of its wise men. And it also says in verse 49 of chapter 2 that at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon. Chapter 3, we find King Nebuchadnezzar has allowed pride to build up himself, and we find him making himself to be a god. He made an image of solid gold, 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, and he set it up out in this wide open area, this plain in Babylon. He gathered all the officials together to dedicate this image of himself. So they all come together, and this is what was proclaimed. So this is what you are commanded to do, people, nations, and men of every language. As soon as you hear all of these musical instruments play, you must fall down and worship the image of gold that Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And verse 6 says, whoever does not fall down and worship his golden image, he'll be thrown into a blazing furnace. Now this furnace would be a huge fire pot. They probably used it for baking bricks, or possibly for melting metal to make different things. But it was a huge, huge furnace. So it says in verse 7, as soon as they heard all these musical instruments, They fell down and they worshiped the image of gold that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. But now some astrologers come forward and they start talking against the Jews. And they said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "You've issued a decree that when all these instruments are played, everybody is supposed to bow down and worship your golden image." But they said, and you also said, whoever does not will be thrown into the blazing furnace. They said, "King, we want to let you know that there are some people who are not doing what you decreed." And they named them specifically Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They said they pay no attention to you, King. They neither serve your gods nor do they worship the image of gold that you have set up. And verse 13 says, Nebuchadnezzar became furious. He sent for these three young men. They were brought before him. Now you have to realize that they are in a position of leadership in his kingdom. He likes them. He's been impressed by them. But when you issue a decree, everybody has to follow it or there is going to be consequences. So he sends for them and he brings them, and what he does, he gives them one more chance. He said, "Is it true that you don't serve my gods or worship the image that I set up?" He says, "I'm going to give you one more chance. So I'm going to have all the musicians start playing. When they start playing, when you're ready, fall down, worship the image." He said, "Everything will be very good. But if you don't, you're going to be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. And then, what God is going to be able to rescue you?" He's almost mocking their God. He says, "You don't fall down and worship me and my image, nobody's going to save you. I am going to throw you in this furnace." And I'm sure that he's totally expected they're going to do what he said. And I'm sure that 99% of the people would have done what he said. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's response is totally different than what he was expecting. They were respectful, but they said, "Nebuchadnezzar, we don't need to defend ourselves in this matter. We don't need to think about it. We don't need to go home and pray about it. This is our answer. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold that you have set up." They had confidence. They knew that the God they served was the same God that we serve, totally capable of rescuing them. They don't have any doubts that he can rescue them. They said he will. But they said even if he doesn't. Now some people would read that, and I might get in trouble here. But some people would read that and they think, well, they just opened the door for doubt. Because they say, well, even if he doesn't. Don't speak those words or he won't. No. There's times that we get criticized, and I've heard remarks because I've prayed this way by two, that I'll pray for somebody and I'll pray that if it is God's will, that this will happen. And people will say, you can't pray like that. Because God's will is that he answers all your needs and he supplies everything that you have to have, and his desire is to heal you, bless you in all these ways. But he has provided. Jesus Christ has provided for our healing. And I believe that these young men felt the same way that I feel. God can do it. He's totally capable, and I know he can. But he's not always going to do things the way that we think it should be done. If he did, if God answered each and every one of our prayers, gave us everything that we answered for, everybody in the world would say that they worship that God. Not because they love him, but because they want answered all the prayers. They want the prayers answered now. And most of you have heard me share this many times before, but some of you newer ones probably haven't. But I had this happen with my mother. My mother had polio. She had a leg that was paralyzed. She wore a brace. She walked with sticks, we call them. And when I went into the ministry, I just started in the ministry, and one night I had a dream or a vision. I don't remember what it was, but God showed me my mother walking. And I tell you what, I got excited because I knew that God was going to do a miracle, and I would see my mother walk. But as the years went on, I began to realize I thought she was going to be healed of polio. That's what she had. Years went on, it didn't happen. And I'm thinking, Lord, what was that? Was that dream vision? Was that not from you? Did I misunderstand? But shortly before my mother died, something happened, and I had the opportunity to pray with her. And at that point, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that she accepted Jesus Christ, that she is going to be in heaven, and I am going to see her walk. It didn't happen the way I thought it was going to happen, but it happened. God is, what's the word I'm looking for? He can do what he wants to do. He can do what is best. And what God does isn't always what we think is the best. These guys have the confidence, and don't by any way let this plant seeds of doubt in your mind. Keep asking God for your miracles, because he still does miracles. And he's going to continue doing miracles. But just realize, some things aren't going to happen on this side of heaven. Some things are going to happen when you step through the gates of heaven to go receive the healing or whatever it might be. Keep asking. You have not because you ask not, so keep asking. But that was the attitude these young men had. They said, we don't have to defend ourselves. Our God is able. He will. But even if he doesn't, we're not going to worship your God. This made the king absolutely furious. And it says something interesting, his attitude toward them changed. Up to this point, he's hoping in his heart that these young men are going to do what he wants them to do, because he doesn't want to throw them in the furnace. But now after this comment, he wants to throw them in the furnace. So he ordered that the furnace be heated up 7 times hotter than usual. He commanded some of the strongest soldiers in the army to tie them up, to bind them, and to throw them into the furnace. So these 3 young men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were tied up, bound, and thrown into the blazing furnace. And it says the furnace was so hot that the soldiers that carried them up there and threw them into the pit, into the furnace, the soldiers were killed. That's how hot the flames were. And it says these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. All of a sudden, there's this big opening where you can see into the furnace, and King Nebuchadnezzar is back a ways so that he doesn't get burned. But all of a sudden, he peers into the flames, and you can almost see him sit up, take attention. It says he leapt to his feet in amazement. He turns to his advisor and he says, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the furnace? And I'm sure these guys are saying, well, hello. Yes, there was 3 men. Don't you remember some of your own soldiers were killed and threw the 3 men in there? He says, yes, but look. look in the fire. He said, there's not three, there's four. I recognize three of them, but the other one looks like the Son of God. He approached the opening of the blazing furnace and he shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. A light went on. Their God was and is the Most High God. Now it's something interesting. He says, I see four men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. Remember, they've been tied up and thrown in there, and now they're walking around. Their ropes that they've been tied with were the only things that got burned. They were unharmed. It says they came out of the fire, and everybody crowded around them, and they saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched. They didn't even smell like smoke. The fire burned only the cords that bound them. I think God does the same thing in our lives when we go through times of afflictions. And we think, why, God, are we going through this? And I think what happens is we go through tough times and go through these afflictions, that what is accomplished is God's purpose. He sets us free. We come out the other side better than when we went in. And we're set free. Nebuchadnezzar said, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him. They defied my commands, and they were willing to give up their lives rather than to serve or worship any God except their own. And as was mentioned this morning, I think sometimes we have many gods in our lives, not in the form of actual gods that we worship, but things. Whether it be money or cars or whatever it might be. The king was so impressed. So he said, I decree that people of any nation or language who say anything against their God, now he's a reasonable king. If anybody says anything against these guys as God, he said, I'm going to have you cut into pieces. I'm going to turn your house into a pile of rubble. What a nice guy. But you see how things changed because they had faith and trust in God, and God honored that faith and that trust, and because of that, everything did a total turnaround. It says, then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. God went through them, went with them through this fire. We're going to turn to chapter 6. We want to look at the other story. It's Daniel in the lion's den. Now, when Daniel was in captivity, he served under, I believe it was 4 different kings. Babylon, at the time when these men were there, was taken over by the Medo-Persian Empire. Daniel served under 4 different kings, but yet he was blessed. Even though he is a foreigner, he's a captive, he's a prisoner, he was blessed under all 4 of these kings. Why? Because they knew that there's something different about his life. They didn't know what it was, but they knew there was something different. They knew that for some reason that this man was blessed. And when we come to the story of Daniel in the lion's den, Daniel at this time is in his 80s. Been there a long time. There's a different king. The king's name is Darius. Darius appointed leaders throughout the kingdom, 120 satraps. And he had 3 administrators that were over the 120. And one of the administrators, one out of the 3, was Daniel. High position of honor. And all of these other men were accountable to Daniel and the other 2 administrators to watch over the king's estate, his business dealings, all these different things. But it says Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king was planning on putting him in charge over the whole kingdom. Reminds me of Joseph. Same situation. God blessed him. So now word kind of goes out that the king is thinking about putting Daniel in charge of the whole kingdom. So the rest of these men that are currently holding the position don't like it. You know, what's going to happen to their jobs? So they try to find grounds for charges against Daniel. So they're watching him day and night. Everything that Daniel does, they're watching him. They're trying to find him do something wrong. They're trying to have him compromise with something to do with the king's kingdom. Something to bring a charge against Daniel. They can't find anything. He does what he's supposed to do. He's honest. No crooked dealings. And trust me, if you got somebody trying to find you doing something wrong, they're usually going to find something. But they couldn't find anything. He says they couldn't find anything because there was no corruption in him. He was trustworthy. He wasn't corrupt. He wasn't negligent. So finally these men came to the conclusion that we're never going to find any basis for charges against Daniel unless it's got something to do with his job. See, they knew that there was something different about Daniel, and apparently they knew that he worshiped a different God than they did because he was so highly blessed. Daniel made a lot of enemies at work. Why? Because he did a good job. I don't know if that ever happened to anybody here, but you know, a lot of workplaces, they're not filled with believers, are they? True believers. And if you go into your job and you just do all things as unto the Lord, you do what you're supposed to do for your boss, in fact, you do more than you're supposed to do, God's going to bless you because that's the way He is. Others aren't going to like it. You know, maybe you've gotten promoted over somebody that's been there longer because you've done a better job, but they don't like it. That's what's happening with Daniel. So many times in situations like that, the people that you work with are going to try and set you up. Try and, like these guys who are trying to catch you doing something you shouldn't do. Any little thing that they can report to the boss to bring you down. Because they think if they can bring you down, that it'll bring them up. But it just wasn't happening with Daniel. He had nothing to hide, as we should have nothing to hide. And if that's the way we do our jobs, people are going to have a hard time bringing the accusations against us. So they go to the king, and they kiss up to the king and say, "Oh, King Darius, live forever," which they were supposed to address him that way, but I'm sure that they sweetened it up as best they could. And it says in verse 7 that the administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors they told the king, have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce a decree that anyone who prays to any god or man during the next 30 days, except you, O king, that they should be thrown into the lion's den. Now we know that statement was a lie. They go to the king, and the first thing it says that the royal administrators and everybody's gotten together, we've all agreed. That's a lie. Daniel is one of the 3 administrators. He didn't agree to this, because he doesn't worship their God. So they lied to the king, they made up false junk. So the king put the decree in writing. Well, nowadays, the king, the president, whatever, can make a law, and it can be reversed, it can be changed. But in those days, it couldn't. And these days, when the king made a decree, he could not change it himself. When he made it, it was made, it was going to be carried out no matter what happened. We see the same thing in the book of Esther, the same type of situation. So verse 10 says, now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home, he went upstairs, he closed all his windows, and he hid, and he never prayed again. Is that what it says? Daniel went home, he went upstairs where the windows were wide open toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and he prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. He didn't change a thing. And I'm sure that these men had seen Daniel in his upstairs window on his knees, praying to his God 3 times a day. So where do you suppose these guys are? Outside, watching the window. And there's Daniel. He didn't fold, he didn't buckle, he didn't change anything. He did what he's always done. He worshiped his God, he prayed. And they see him doing it. So it says they went as a group, they found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they go to the king, and they said, King, didn't you make a decree that during the next 30 days, if anybody worships any other god or anybody except you, they're going to be thrown in the lion's den? The king says, yeah. Well, they said, Daniel pays no attention to you. And he pays no attention to the decree that you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. Verse 14 says, when the king heard this, he was greatly distressed, and he was determined to rescue Daniel, and he made every effort until sundown to save Daniel. He liked Daniel. Daniel had been a blessing to the king. And now he's realizing that he's been deceived. Daniel didn't agree to this decree. He wasn't one of the ones that came up with it, but the king had already made it. So he's trying to figure out some way to get Daniel out of this situation. He can't do it. So the men again go to as a group to the king in verse 15 and say, remember, king, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. So he has to send for Daniel. And he threw him into the lion's den. And the king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. He doesn't ask his gods to rescue Daniel. He knows they can't do it. When he's thinking there's something special about Daniel's God, he said, Daniel, I hope your God can get you out of this situation because I can't. They bring a huge stone and they place it over the mouth of the lion's den, and it's sealed. The king goes back to his palace, and he's up all night, pacing back and forth. He doesn't do the normal things where he sits down and has a midnight snack and has entertainment brought in. There's none of that stuff. He's worried. He's pacing the floor. He's concerned about Daniel. Because he couldn't sleep. And at first light, the king hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called out to Daniel in an angry voice. He says, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to rescue you from the lions? This voice comes up from the den. Well, King, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They haven't hurt me. Because my God called me innocent in his sight. And Daniel says, I've been innocent in your sight too, O King. I've never done anything wrong before you. The king is overjoyed. He gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, there was not a single scratch on him because he had trusted in his God. Now this king was a reasonable man, just like Nebuchadnezzar was, so at the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den along with their wives and their children. And the lions did not eat Daniel because they weren't hungry. They didn't eat Daniel because God shut their mouths and they couldn't. Because it says when they threw these guys, their wives, and their families in, it said they didn't even hit the floor, and the lions grabbed them out of midair and crushed them and ate them. Then Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and men of every language throughout the land. He said, I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. These are the words that the king writes about Daniel's God. For he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and also during the reign of Cyrus. God protected him. Because Daniel took a stand for God, that he was elevated, he was blessed, other people knew that Daniel's God was the one true God. We go through troubles just like these four men did. But we need to realize that God is still in control. God limits our troubles and there can be no more. God says this can happen. He says there's 10 things that can happen, that's it. There's not going to be 11. Because God is in control. The Bible says that he weighs the mountains and the scales and the hills in the balance. And he takes care to measure your troubles. And you shall not have a grain more than his infinite wisdom sees fit. I know there's times when it seems like the devil is turned loose in our lives, but we need to realize that he's on a leash. He can only go so far. God is still in control. Nebuchadnezzar may be able to heat the furnace 7 times hotter, but God's still in charge of the thermometer. He doesn't want you to get burned. You're not going to get burned. We need to consider everything that we suffer that has been allowed by God through his love. And if you can have that mindset, you can rejoice when you go through problems. You can know that it's going to make you a stronger and a better person. When you go through your suffering or whatever you go through, that God's going to give you special comforts when you go through these things. When people go through things, God gives you things that other people don't have. When you can come out on the other side of a sickness or a disease or financial disaster, whatever it might be, somebody that hasn't been through that hasn't been blessed the way you have. Because you've seen the hand of God move in your life. And because of that, you're able to help others go through the same thing. A deep, dark cave isn't going to keep the miners out when they know that there's diamonds at the end of it. There can't be a testimony without a test. I've never heard a nightingale, but they say that their song is beautiful, but if there was never a night, it wouldn't be the song of the nightingale. There are times in your life when you're never going to see God's face or the face of the Lord as clearly as when everybody else seems to turn their back on you. And you have to turn to the Lord. So when we're going through severe trouble and we feel like we're in just a prison of trouble, that God visits us. Once in a while you run into a person where it seems like their words are just like pearls. Well, it's because they've been through deep waters. Or it seems like they're just like a diamond. Well, you can't be a diamond unless you've been crushed, chiseled, polished. You have to go through a lot of things. Jesus talked about the vine and the branches. He is the vine, the true vine, and we are the branches. But as many plants and grapevines and things like that, in order for them to produce the ultimate crop, they have to be pruned. Same way with us. God prunes us. And it's hard. You probably think things are going really good and all of a sudden something happens, like you get cut down. You don't understand it. But the next thing you know, God has blessed you more than He's ever blessed you before. You would not be at that point if you had not been pruned. God usually opens up the doors of heaven and lets you see things when you're going through, like John did, a Patmos situation. When it seems like you're hopeless, you'll never get out of there, you just don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you don't know what's going to happen, and then it's at those times when God will open up the windows of heaven and let you just get a glimpse, give you enough hope to carry on. Your trials work in your favor to bring you closer and closer to God. We may never reach the confidence that Abraham had. We may never be able to leave all of our worldly cares behind like Abraham did. So many times we're like Martha, we're just so busy. Busy, doing all these things. Remember what Jesus said to Martha, 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 He said, why don't you just sit down and relax? Why don't you sit at my feet like your sister does? And just listen to me. There are times in our life when it's like the Lord hides His face from us. You know, part of the blessing is, may the Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you His peace. There's times in our lives when it seems like that God has hidden His face from you. But it's kind of like a young mother when you've got a little child that's just learning to walk. And you take that little child out into the sidewalk or downtown or whatever, you go for a walk, and that little child just to waddle off this direction, that direction, and they don't want to listen to you. They just learn how to walk. They want to just go. But that's dangerous. So the mother will duck around the corner, and all of a sudden this little child will stop and, where's mommy? Mommy will step out, the child will go over. What's the purpose for that? That child will cling to their mother so they don't want to lose her again. We do the same thing with God. Sometimes He has to hide His face from us so we will come and look for Him. And every time you go through that, you feel closer to Him, and you want to hang on, you don't want to let go. It's through those times we're drawn closer to Him. I know there are people out there, and I've heard preachers say that if you're going through trouble, you must be living in sin. But that's not necessarily what my Bible told me. In fact, Jesus said in John chapter 16, verse 33, He said, in this world, you will have trouble. But then He adds this, but take heart. I have overcome the world. You will have trouble. But Jesus Christ has overcome the world. Keep your eyes focused on Him. Don't let Him out of your sight. He's not promised to keep us from the trials, but He has promised that He will go through each and every one of them with us.